I did not plan to stop. The highway was empty, the sun already sliding toward the hills, and my mind was fixed on getting home before dark. Then I saw the shadow on the shoulder, a small shape pressed to a road sign post, shaking like a leaf. When I pulled over, the sound hit me first. Not a growl. A thin, breaking cry. The kind of sound your chest answers before your head does. A bare cub, ribs showing, paws scraped raw, eyes swollen with dust, staring at the asphalt like it had been abandoned by the entire world. I kept my hands open and low. "Easy, buddy," I said, though my voice came out rough. The cub tried to stand and slumped again. There was no big shadow in the brush, no heavy breath, no mother. My heart pounded in a steady drum, counting bad options. Leave it and let nature decide, or pick it up and make the mess my own. I slid my jacket off and wrapped the cub, the way you would a crying child. It flinched, but it did not fight. The bones were light. Too light. I carried it to the truck and laid it on the passenger seat, my jacket making a tight nest. On the way home, I called Hannah, my next-door neighbor who volunteers at a wildlife clinic. "Do not feed it milk," she said. "Do not give bread. Warmth first. Water by drops. Call me when you get home." At my house, the evening smelled like cut grass and engine grease. I cleared the garage, pulled the old camping crate to the middle, and set the cub down with a hot water bottle tucked beneath the jacket. The cub breathed fast, eyes half shut. I said, "I have you now." I'm in it more than I expected. Hannah showed up with a small bottle and powdered formula made for wildlife rehab. She said, "This is temporary, David. We find a licensed center first thing tomorrow." I nodded and watched the cub suck clumsily, both paws kneading the air. That was the first moment I felt the hook set inside me. You think you were just helping for one night. You are wrong. By midnight, the cub found its feet. It bumped around the crate and sneezed dust and whimpered when I stepped back. I said, "Hey, I am not going far," and it settled, like it understood simple honesty. I slept on the floor next to the crate with the garage light off, and the door cracked a hand. Sometime before dawn it woke, yelped, and pressed against the bars until its nose touched my palm. I lay there and counted breaths until the sky turned pale. The next day turned messy. Words slipped. A neighbor walked up the drive with his phone held high like a badge. "You cannot keep that here," he said. "It is dangerous." Another neighbor whispered, "The noise last night. My kids were crying." Hannah tried to calm them. She said, "We are contacting a center. It is legal to transport to a rehab if you do it fast and right." The man with the phone shook his head. He said, "You do that now, or I call someone." The cub heard the voices and made a sound that sliced right behind my ribs. I said, "Give me one day." The man glared and left. I tightened the crate and set up a fan and fed the cub again. It chewed the edge of my boot and sneezed. I laughed in spite of everything. I said, "You are trouble. You are alive." By afternoon, with the heat thick and the smell of oil and milk mixing in the garage, I finally reached a rehab center. The voice on the line said, "We are at capacity. If the cub is stable, you can hold until tomorrow. Do not imprint. Minimal contact." I looked at the cub licking the water bottle and thought about the word minimal. Sometimes words are a poor fit for the ache inside a room. That night it unraveled. The cub woke and woke again, called out, then went quiet, then cried harder. I stepped outside to breathe and saw two people at the end of the drive pointing toward my house. The cub pushed the crate door with surprising strength. The latch slipped. I dived, but too late. It scampered across the floor, claws scratching concrete, and squeezed through the cracked garage door into the warm dark. I ran barefoot into the yard. The grass wet my ankles, the air buzzing with insects. I followed the soft grunts, past the woodpile, past the fence line, into the greenbelt that backs the neighborhood. The cub moved faster than I thought it could, as if the wild had stepped into its bones and switched them on. I reached the edge of the trees and stopped because the night changed. It thickened. A new breath moved in the brush. Heavy, slow. The silhouette stepped out from the blackberry canes, a big bear, shoulders like a hill under fur. The cub froze, then made a sound that sounded like a question asked 1,000 times. Hope is a knife that cuts two ways. I raised my arms and spoke low. "Easy. I am not here to hurt you." The big bear swayed its head, sniffed, and let out a short huff that vibrated through my teeth. The cub ran toward it, reckless, believing in an answer. The answer was not a mother. The big bear was a male, scarred muzzle, one ear torn, the moon drawing a pale line along his back. He snapped at the air above the cub. Not a full bite. A warning. The cub skidded, confused. It looked back at me, eyes wide. I felt something old wake up in me. I stepped forward and spoke louder. "Hey, over here." The male turned, lifted his head, and locked onto the shape of a human in a t-shirt and bare feet who had left the safe yard and come here with nothing but a voice. Everything got thin then. The world narrowed to breath and dirt. I did not think about smart choices. I thought about small ribs and a warm bottle and a promise I had made to no one but myself. I kept talking. "Look at me. Good. You see me." I spread my arms wider. The bear came 2 steps closer, nose up, reading the air. I felt the smell of his wild, the musk and the earth and something like rain on metal. My throat wanted to close, but I did not let it. The cub made a low, desperate bleat and pressed against my shin. It shook like a wet puppy. I whispered, "Stay behind me." The male took another step, then another. He was close enough that my skin prickled. He lifted one front paw and set it down, slow, deciding. And then, as if some old calculation reached a quiet result, he huffed again and eased to the left, past us, his shoulder brushing the blackberry leaves. He did not run. He did not threaten. He wandered into the trees as if he had simply remembered a better plan. I did not move for a count that felt like 100. Then I scooped the cub and walked backward, step by step, until my heels found grass and my knees shook with relief. In the garage, I latched the crate with a carabiner and sat on the floor with my head in my hands. I said to the dim air, "That is it. Tomorrow is not a debate." Morning came as a mercy. I loaded the crate into the truck and drove to the rehab center on the far side of the county. The building was low and plain, the parking lot quiet, the air smelling of pine shavings and disinfectant. A woman with gray hair and steady eyes met us at the door. She said, "You did the right thing bringing the cub now. You cannot be its mother, and you should not try." I nodded, throat tight. She showed me a small room with heat lamps and a scale and a whiteboard with names of animals written in neat lines. She said, "You can say goodbye if you want." I knelt at the crate. The cub bumped my fingers with a wet nose. I said, "You are going to live. That is the whole point." A week later, I woke up in a quiet house and felt both lighter and hollow. The garage smelled like soap again. I went back to work at the shop. I told the story badly to a customer and then told it better to a friend that evening over canned chili. Sometimes at night, I heard the soft grip of claws on concrete in my memory, and I smiled at an empty room. A month passed. The rehab center called. They said the cub is gaining weight. We found superficial wounds that are healing well. A wildlife officer thinks the mother was likely hit by a vehicle on a logging road 2 valleys over. No signs of poaching. No traps. Just a world that breaks sometimes and keeps going. 3 months later, I drove back to the center with a crate full of donated supplies from the neighborhood. The man with the phone came by my driveway when he saw me loading the truck. He said I was wrong to push you like that. I said we were both scared. He nodded and helped me lift the box. At the center, a handler led me to a viewing window that looked out on an outdoor pen. The cub stood taller now, fur clean and eyes clear, working a stump with both paws like a carpenter. Another cub jostled it, and they tumbled, clumsy and fierce in the way only the young can be. The handler said release is planned when the berries are full on the slopes. That is when they learn fast. That is when they forget us. That is when they become what they were made to be. The cub looked up for a breath, as if someone had spoken its name. It scanned the tree line, then the ground, then the low fence, not the window. It did not see me. I felt the ache again and let it be. I said softly, "I am glad." The handler smiled. She said that is the sound of a good ending. On the drive home, the hills were heavy with late summer heat. I stopped at the turnout where I had first seen the shadow under the road sign. The post stood the same. The ditch held dry grass and candy wrappers and a single feather. I stepped down into it and picked up the trash because sometimes you clean more than your own part. I stood, brushed my hands, and looked at the long strip of road that holds so many small decisions and the lives they change. I did not keep the cub. That was never the job. The job was to hear a breaking sound and answer it with something human. A hand, a ride, a night on a cold floor, a risk taken with clear eyes. Months later, when I think about that breath in the blackberry canes and the way the big bear chose the trees, I understand a little better. Mercy is not a speech. It is a series of small steps taken in the right direction until the wild remembers its way and you remember yours.